Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to another episode of the Scho Bro Show. This is behind the steel curtain editor Dave Schofield coming at you. It's Tuesday night. It's 9:05 p.m. You're a Steelers fan. Where else would you rather be other than, celebrating a Steelers victory? And with me, as always, is no, it's not. It's not. I don't have Big Bro Scho here today. If you follow the show, if you know what's going on, you've heard last week, Rich is on vacation. Yeah, he's fishing. But I'm not here by myself. I am not. I've got someone else here to take the role of honorary Scho Bro. And as Rich said, guess what? He might have to, if he does a good job, he will have to be the permanent temporary Scho Bro, is the way I think my brother put it. He might even be and he is in the live chat tonight. So Big Bro Scho is here for it. But instead, joining me tonight, we have State of the Steelers, Daniel J. Daniel, how's it going?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's been a roller coaster of emotions the last couple of days, so to speak, with what's been going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I tell you what, I'm still living in what I said to Jeff Hartman in his living room on Sunday after the game. And that is, I would rather see the Steelers at 1-3 going forward with the excitement of Kenny Pickett than them at 2-2 and wondering week by week, is Mitch Trubisky going to be able to inspire the offense enough to get a win, or when is the change going to be made? It's kind of one of those deals. I remember several things in my life, many of which I won't share, but it's one of those things of, man, you're constantly asking yourself, should you or should you not? Should you or should you not? When you finally get around to where should you don't have to answer the question anymore. Should the Steelers move to Kenny Pickett? Should they not? Should they not? The question's done. You don't have to ask the question anymore. So do you kind of feel the same way? Do you kind of feel like a sense of relief that there's not that question hanging over it anymore?
Oh, for sure. 100%. I mean, it's been like I said, almost like a roller coaster throughout each game. Each game has been close and frustrating on one side of the ball, and then it's flip-flopped and then gone side to side. And the big question mark has always been, when is Kenny Pickett coming in? Yeah. And, I thought Mitch Trubisky was doing okay and not enough to lose the game. I was extremely surprised when Kenny Pickett, came out on the field. But I'll tell you what, I was wearing my Pat Freiermuth jersey. I ran straight to my closet, put on my Kenny Pickett one, was in my living room jumping up and down. I was excited.
I might get in trouble for telling this story, but that's what happens when Jeff Hartman opens his door to me at his house, which unfortunately I'm going to complain a little bit. I got to go back to Jeff's house this week. I thought for sure that putrid purple team that I am in their home network plays Sunday night. So I'm like, here we go. Steelers, Bills, that's going to be 1:00 CBS. I'm ready for it. And what do you know? The station that I get that is CBS is out of Washington. And guess who plays on CBS instead of Fox this week? Washington. Man, I'm so frustrated. But anyway, back at Jeff's, I want to see Jeff in different attire, because apparently one Brian Anthony Davis already added a jersey to Jeff Hartman's collection. And Jeff's like, I'm not doing that until he plays. And then he plays. I love it. That's just kind of one of those fun things as a fan. I want to bring up a couple things from the live chat that I noticed right away, because I was looking for my brother to be in there. So I actually saw a couple things. First of all, we have Nate Van Slyke that says, Dave, I had such a great time at the game Sunday. You know what? Yes, the Steelers lost, but if you really want to know the truth, I'll ask, I don't think you've been there when they've lost. Have you, Daniel?
I have. My wife hasn't.
Okay.
But we will be going for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. So I'm bringing her along with me as well.
Nice. Nice. Well, I wasn't sure. Well, now have you been in a game where they lost since you got your season tickets, or was that when you would go to games before that you've been there where they lost?
No, it was before. The last game that I witnessed. Yeah, the last game that I witnessed that they lost was the debacle against the Chargers, where
the false start penalty they didn't call, and
exactly
the blocked field goal that they said they were offsides, and that one. But I'm saying this, Nate, I don't know, because maybe you can answer this as well, Daniel. To me, believe it or not, being surrounded by 60,000 other Steelers fans dealing with a loss is a lot more comforting than watching it at home on my couch. Well, or on Jeff Hartman's couch this year. Agree or disagree?
In Acrisure, yes. I've been that same season. I was in New Orleans for the loss against the Saints, and I'd rather be at home for that loss. Their fans were rowdy.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I said when you're surrounded by 60,000 Steeler fans, I don't think that was the case when you were there. So
No.
I've been to one road game since I became a season ticket holder, and I don't ever want to do that again. And some people are like, oh, why not? It's just once you get used to what was Heinz Field, what is now Acrisure Stadium, there's just nothing like it. It's just not the same anywhere else. Before we have a lot to cover, we're going to cover the news. The title of this podcast could be a little bit, people are like, wait a second, hold on. Trust me, it might not be what you're thinking. It's a different angle than what you might realize. I'm asking a question about Kenny Pickett that, believe it or not, doesn't actually really have much to do with Kenny Pickett. And you'll understand when we get there. Here's another one before I lose it. I just wanted to ask you because I saw this on Facebook. This is from Pedro. He says, hey, when are we going to address the man downfield? Because the Steelers got called for that. Have you noticed that that's been getting called not just against the Steelers? I mean, the Jets got called for it. I saw it called in another game last weekend, not this last weekend, but the one before. It seems like that must be a point of emphasis this year because I've seen those penalties called for things that I did not see in the past. Thoughts on that real quick?
No, I agree 100%. I've seen it on both sides against the Steelers and their opponents. I was watching the Buffalo Bills-Ravens game, and it was called in that game as well. I think there's been an emphasis on that penalty and also the delay of game penalty.
Yeah.
Like they're calling that right as it's hitting zeros. And I'll be honest with you, I prefer it that way.
Yeah. Yep. I know what you mean. That if it really is, I mean, they have the 40-second clock whenever the play ends for a reason. If you're always going to give them one more second, then just make it a 41-second clock. So just do it. But be consistent with it, because there have been times where I've seen teams that were like 2 seconds beyond and they did not throw the flag, and there are other ones as soon as it hits zeros they throw it. What teams come to expect, you should do. If teams are used to having their guys, it's someone said it in the live chat. It's the RPOs with them downfield. I think this is a way where they're trying to keep those RPOs from where teams act like it's a run and they still pass and there's no penalties for it. I think they're trying to rein it in a little bit. I don't know why. I guess it's just one of those things. Hey, if it's a rule, you might as well call it. But as long as it's enforced equally across the league and to all teams, I'm okay with it. But now teams have to adjust. It's kind of like this. I actually used to run it. I used to be the president of an adult basketball league. And we had actual high school officials come in and officiate our games. And we had a running clock. So even if there was a foul called, it's not like the clock stopped. And I said to the officials one time, why are you letting so much pushing and shoving and hacking go on? Call the fouls. And the guy says, if we called every foul, we'd be here all night. I'm like, well, first of all, you won't. It's a running clock. Second of all, if you start calling it, they are adults. They will adjust. And if you don't call it, they're just going to get rougher and rougher and rougher. So if the league's going to call these penalties, teams have to adjust. Agreed?
For sure.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So that's 2 on the Steelers so far. Before we get into the news, I do have to say, do you realize what's the date today? Today's it's Tuesday the 4th, correct?
Yes, the 4th.
We are almost exactly a year away from our first show together.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's right.
Then when I did the little, what was it? Was it Scho Bro Show? I think is what Dad ended up calling it. When I was at a game, you were at the game. First time I met you in person. Did a little shot after the game. What is it? It was like 4 or 5 minutes. You were there. My son was there too, but he wasn't in the shot, right? I'm trying to remember. No. Yeah. But yeah, that was fun. So we're almost a year later, and here you are, part of the BTSC network, your own show, State of the Steelers, that comes out on our audio platform on Saturday mornings. Plus you have your own YouTube channel where you have, how many other shows do you have on there?
Oh,
I don't have the answer to that.
On the YouTube side, I have I have three. I have two that are referenced to the Steelers, and then I have one that I do that has none completely opposite. It talks into UFOs, film actors, things of that nature, and so we have musicians there. But I have two with the Steelers that are on. One with Mark Davison, who's also part of Behind the Steel Curtain, and then Nathan Heinz, and we do something called the Unofficial Steelers Podcast that goes back and forth on ours, and then I have mine, State of the Steelers. Has been doing fairly well. We just hit over 1,000 subs a couple weeks ago.
There you go. There you go. So, as you say, part of the BTSC family, but as some of us are, you guys have other stuff going on too, and that's great. Let's get to the news.
Yes,
because I know people are waiting for it. We're 10 minutes in. The news, Mike Tomlin had probably his longest press conference in season of the year so far. It was over 30 minutes. He didn't wait for the question and answer. We knew it was coming. The report was out Monday night from Ian Rappaport that Kenny Pickett was going to be the starter. About an hour before the press conference, 45 minutes, the Steelers did their media release, which had the depth chart that had Kenny Pickett moved up to QB1. Coach Tomlin, he just said it. We're going forward with Kenny. Lots of questions about it that came out later as well. If you're curious about those, there's always my Players Mentioned article, which will be out at 8:15 Pittsburgh time on Wednesday morning, that has all the quotes in there from the questions about all the various players. But Coach Tomlin, I mean, he was also asked, is this a week-to-week thing or what's going on? And he's basically saying, well, we play everything week to week. We look to play this week to the next week, but we're not planning on blowing in the wind where we say we're going to answer this question each week. And so it is until it's not. Do you think that's a fair assessment of the way he said it?
Yes. And I think that if you also look back when Mitch Trubisky was announced the starter, he was also asked in a press conference if, at what point did he feel that Mitch Trubisky won the job? And he said that was continual, meaning that was a continuous thing happening week to week basis. And I think he answered it differently when it came to Kenny Pickett. It's subtly, but differently, meaning that, that things can happen and things can change, but it's a little bit different in my opinion.
Gotcha. Yeah. I know what you mean. Well, because there have been times, this is more, you see it in college when they have two quarterbacks and they're like, hey, we'll announce who's starting each week just for that game. That's not what their Steelers are saying at all, but it doesn't mean just because they're saying that's the starter moving forward that things still couldn't change, which that's life in the NFL. That really is. Hey, we've already got $10 into the tip jar from Steel Dog 88. Thank you very much, Steel Dog. He says, this is hypothetical, but gotta love this. Here's your hypothetical. If Kenny plays well moving forward, can you see trading Trubisky before the trade deadline? Mitch looked like a hostage post game. I would be fine with Mason as QB2. What do you think, Daniel?
I thought about this, earlier in this season, that could be an option that, even Mitch Trubisky could have higher trade value. At this point, based on what he's put on film, it's probably not as high as it was then. I don't think so. I don't think the Steelers are going to make that move. I think Trubisky's probably more of a fit for this offense if Kenny goes down than Mason Rudolph. And, he's a little bit more mobile and moves well around in the pocket, and it's probably maybe not as accurate down the field, but isn't that more of that traditional style quarterback? So I feel that if Kenny, something were to happen to Kenny, I think Mitch would be the best option. I don't see the Steelers moving away from him.
To me, it's kind of like the whole Josh Dobbs situation when they traded him to Jacksonville. They weren't looking to trade Josh Dobbs. And honestly, in my opinion, they were not. But you pick up the phone. If anyone's really, really looking for something and you want, and because the Steelers don't have to have both those guys, because chances are if you have to then go back to Mitch or then to Mason and you would need all three, the season is probably not going any better than what it is right now, if that makes any kind of sense. No, yeah. So to me, if somebody really wants one of those guys as a one, or I guess Trubisky has 2 years left on his deal this year, next year, that's a whole different story, but it's not like they're out shopping. That's why it's very hypothetical. It's one of those things you're not worried about going out and getting something now, but if somebody comes knocking and it's something that can bring value to you, you just go for it. So, all right. So Coach Tomlin talked about some injuries. it's kind of some people said that Ahkello Witherspoon has been ruled out for this week. I don't know that he's 100% ruled out, but what Coach Tomlin said is don't anticipate on him being available again this week. So it's not that it's impossible, but in essence, he's ruled out. Coach Tomlin does that a lot, where he tells you something without exactly telling you something, and you can imply it. But he doesn't. There's always room to wiggle with that. But Ahkello Witherspoon looks like he's going to be out again this week. Man, I have to report the PFF grades, and Levi Wallace had the lowest grade on the Steelers defense this past week. Had a bit of a rough week. What do you feel about Noah Ahkello Witherspoon?
I think that's huge. It's huge for this defense that is hurting right now, especially in the backfield. Minkah Fitzpatrick has a knee injury that Tomlin described as having to be managed throughout the week. That means that he's not going to be in there a full participant. Cam Sutton had a groin, and now you add on to a hamstring on top of that. Levi Wallace, I thought he didn't play his best game either. I would have thought Arthur Mollett had a worse grade than him, but
they were both down there.
I'm not surprised.
Mollett had a couple more redeeming plays, probably. Even though, think about it, even though he didn't come up with that interception, it at least counted as a pass defense when you think about it. So, but you went on with what I was going to say. What is concerning is, you got the Levi Wallace. It's not like Ahkello Witherspoon had been tearing it up either, but then you add on the Cam Sutton, you add on Minkah Fitzpatrick. Maybe I look for Minkah to be able to play, but he just might not practice much this week. And then you've got to me, another one that I think might be the most significant, assuming Minkah's a little bit more having the possibility to play, and that's Terrell Edmunds being in the protocol. If he can move through that, especially with them implementing, I think the new things they're implementing with the protocol has to be playing in the game when things first happen. I haven't been able to read through everything that they're trying to change, but bottom line is he's either going to be cleared to play and can play, or he's not cleared to play and should not play. Bottom line. But man, Terrell Edmunds, he had the highest grade on the Steelers defense this past week, and it kind of goes to show how much they missed him in that second half. That's basically all four starters in the secondary in the base defense. How concerning is that?
Oh man, that's extremely concerning, especially when you're going up against a quarterback like Josh Allen that can extend the play and run and is used as a runner quite often. These guys are gonna, if they're turned around in man coverage or whatnot and have to make a tackle on that man, it's kind of like what Ben used to do to a bunch of the cornerbacks back in the day.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a tough battle. I mean, I know that the Buffalo Bills are dealing with some injuries at the wide receiver position as well. However, Stephon Diggs is going to be out there, and I don't think the Steelers have an answer for him in the cornerback position. They're going to definitely have to cover him. And, when the Steelers have done that, they have made a name out of an unknown receiver somewhere on the offense.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That all of a sudden someone you don't expect or hadn't really heard of is like the guy. I know exactly what you're thinking. Well, but I can't remember his name now. He was the phenom for several weeks, even though the Steelers won the game when they played the Eagles 2 years ago.
Yeah,
are you thinking? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking of. Someone in the live chat, they'll hook us up. What was the name of the receiver for the Eagles that just no one had ever heard of? It just went crazy against the Steelers, although the Steelers did ultimately end up winning that game, didn't that? Yeah, because that was part of the 11-0 season.
Yeah, and Hogan from the Patriots says, Pedro reminds me, that's another one that made his name against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah. So it happens kind of often when there's a big name that the Steelers have to take out.
Dusk Thunder 9 got it. A little bit misspelled. Someone else put it up there. Thank you, charmingly sophisticated. Also said it was Travis Fulgham. Yep. That's what it was. Yeah. Someone people hadn't heard of had that huge game against the Steelers. So I know exactly what you mean with that. So yeah, secondary banged up. Cam Hayward's dealing with some injury and stuff, but he had his like I said, if you don't like the PFF scores, I don't blame you at all because you just never quite know when they're getting it right. But according to them, Cam had his best game of the season this past week. Not entirely sure if that's completely accurate, but he was up there. Whew. So that's a lot of banged up stuff on the defense. And as Coach Tomlin said, when you're dealing with Josh Allen, you really want to be able to rush 5 against him. But you pretty much have to have 2 guys looking at Stephon Diggs. And unfortunately, they don't let you play with 13 people. So he's like, he's like, we have mathematical issues that we have to overcome, is what Coach Tomlin was saying. That from a number standpoint, Buffalo is tough. And the Steelers are currently 14-point underdogs. We'll see if that line holds, because they've never been 14-point underdogs before, since they've started doing the spread. I don't know what the year is when they go back to officially know what the spreads are, but the spreads are determined by what they were at kickoff. So that could fluctuate between now and then based on things, but I don't know that it will. The biggest underdog the Steelers had ever been before this was in Super Bowl. I can't remember the Super Bowl number. I just know it was the 95 season when they lost the Cowboys, and they were the 13.5-point underdogs. But third, thank you. That this is the biggest underdog that they've been. Now, they've been double-digit underdogs. They were twice last year, both to the Chiefs, both in the playoffs and the regular season. So, but this is a big one. This is a tough one for them going forward. And just to sum up the news, because I really want to talk about them going forward, the Steelers did make 2 moves in regards to the practice squad today. They undid the move they did last week, where they released the center McCollum when they brought in Jordan Berry. So this week they released Jordan Berry and signed McCollum back. They also got released wide receiver Jaquari Robertson. He's been on and off the practice squad a couple times already. They brought in a safety, Scott Nelson, to the practice squad just because they need more bodies in the secondary just in order to practice and everything. I know some people might start to ask, oh, well, what about DeMonte KZ? Both Calvin Austin III and DeMonte KZ, there are now officially can come off of IR and can open that 21-day window. And Coach Tomlin didn't say we're starting the window for Calvin Austin, but he said, well, that when that window will open, and we'll let his participation and everything determine where we go from there. He basically said they are going to start the window.
But with KZ,
it's different.
Yeah, isn't he still have a week left on his suspension?
He's got a week left in his suspension. I talked about that on the Mike Tomlin post-game podcast. I actually have it in my article tomorrow. That's the thing with KZ. So you don't even have that extra body for practice that they might have been able to squeeze one in with the guy coming back from IR to where you had the extra guy. But they just had to go get some bodies. So that was the thing. Other people were already there about we're already saying that about KZ in the live chat. So see, Steeler fans are on it, especially the ones that are here joining us live. These are some of these things that they've got going for them. I'm trying to think if there's any other big news, or if we just want to get into talking about Kenny Pickett.
I think that's the big news everybody wants to talk about or hear about.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, a lot of our podcasts are going to be about Kenny Pickett, but this is something that I specifically wanted to bring up. And I want to ask you your opinion about it. And that is, I asked the question of, will Steelers fans see the same Kenny Pickett on Sunday? Now, when I ask that question, I'm not really asking it about will Kenny Pickett be the same? My question is this. And I kind of almost looked at this with Mitch Trubisky, and I have this notion in my head that's been stuck there ever since 2019. And that is, do the Steelers sometimes have their quarterbacks that aren't named something that rhymes with Schmoffelsberger so wound up worried about turning the ball over and taking care of things that they basically tie their hands and make them second guess things going forward? I said to Jeff Hartman during the first half of the game, I said, the problem that I see with Mitch Trubisky, I said, I'm not willing right now to say it's definitely a half second, but it's at least a quarter of a second. He seems to be at least a quarter of a second indecisive on everything he does. said, and it probably is a half second, but I just, I was still wanting to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. He seemed a quarter second to a half second late on everything, on the decision to throw, on to do this, on to do that. Almost like it was a slight paralysis through analysis.
Right.
And the reason that this sticks out in my head, sorry if I'm going off in this a little bit. The reason this sticks out in my mind so much was you go back to 2019 and Ben Roethlisberger was out. Randy Fichtner was both the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator. And I remember in one specific press conference, and I couldn't go back and find it exactly because there were so many of them, that Mason Rudolph, no less than 3 times, mentioned about, and Coach Randy hammering it home about not turning the ball over. I got to take care of the ball. I got to take care of the ball. He kept talking and going on and on about Coach Randy and saying about taking care of the ball. And I'm like, could you get any more in this kid's head? I mean, is that an issue? Then I see Mitch Trubisky, who seems to process things slower. And maybe it's just Mitch Trubisky. I don't know him all that well. I didn't watch the Bears when he was there, and he barely played with Buffalo, and I'm not going to waste my time watching North Carolina football. So it's not like I've watched Mitch Trubisky a bunch to know if that's something that was common with him before the Steelers. But I'm like, do they have their quarterback so worried about taking care of the ball that they can't actually go out and be themselves? Because Kenny Pickett comes into the game. He's coming in the middle of the game. He is not the starter. He's getting the opportunity. This is his chance to show what he can do. It's the infamous Dan Fouts. Last game of the season, can't hold anything back,
Yeah.
From the water boy. Although it's not the last game of the season, can't hold anything back. This is your chance. Don't hold anything back. Go for it. Have confidence in yourself to make the play and go for it. Mm-hmm. Do you have any concern that the Steelers are going to try to rein him in and keep him from just going for it?
No. And I'll explain that. Why.
I'm gonna talk for 5 minutes and you're gonna say no. Of course, I know there's an explanation coming.
Yeah. No. So reason being is in the last couple of minutes of the game, with the lead, they kept the ball in Kenny's hands. Those were plays that were called. Yeah. I think it depends on who the quarterback is. If you have a quarterback that has certain limitations, then you're going to be harping it in. You're going to tell them, hey, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, you go back to Mason Rudolph back in the day, when he was drafted, he didn't beat out Dobbs like Pickett beat out Mason. So there's 2 different things that are going on there. And so I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers may have identified early on in Mason Rudolph's career is that he may not be a guy. He may be a career backup. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. And
there's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with that at all. However, when you know that and you know that there's certain limitations there, you're going to also limit the options that they have available to them. And when you have Kenny Pickett, who's shown some development, beginning in training camp all the way through preseason and probably through practices, and the coaches are there and they see the development that he's done. And I believe even Mike Tomlin mentioned in one of his press conferences was advanced development in stadiums, that progress that came to him. They were so pleased with him. I think they are going to let him go out there and do what he needs to do. Now, do I think there's going to be the same Kenny Pickett? I don't think so. And I'll let you answer your side to it. Or if you want me to, it's up to you.
Oh, no. Well, I was posing the question, and my thing is, I don't know that I have the answer. I want to believe your answer. Mm-hmm. But my thing is, when we go to watch this game on Sunday, if Kenny Pickett doesn't seem like he's, oh, wow, this isn't the same guy that was out there, completing 10 of 13 passes to his own team and 3 of 3 to the other team, not a pass hitting the ground. Oh, and throwing the ball downfield and throwing it into some of those. We have Jeffrey Benedict and I have a Vertex coming out tomorrow. It's about George Pickens' game and seeing the difference of the passes coming to him in the first half, the second half, and seeing those things. My thing is, if you don't see the same Kenny Pickett, I don't think it has anything to do with Kenny Pickett. Well, maybe a little bit. I don't think it has the majority to do with Kenny Pickett. I think it has to do if the Steelers now said, "Oh, okay, now here's what we want you to do. You had the 3 interceptions last game. We can't have those. whether we can say the Hail Mary doesn't count, if we can say, hey, when the ball wouldn't have been caught by anyone until the receiver touched it and then it gets caught by someone else, sometimes that's just the way football goes.
Right.
But at the same time, should he have even thrown the throw in the first place? You could debate that a whole bunch. My point is Kenny Pickett might come out slightly different. You know what I mean? This is what I mean. Hold on a second.
Everybody else gets a little tight.
That's what I'm talking about. As Coach Tomlin said, he could come out a little tight. He'd be a little tight. Yeah. That might be what's going on with Kenny Pickett, and that's all right. You know what? He might not come out tight at all because he does not seem to be that kind of guy. It's just a different mentality with him and Mitch.
Have you heard the what Tomlin told Duck before he went out on the field against the Chargers?
I know what he said afterwards, and that was he didn't kill us.
Well, what he said when he was going out on the field was let your hang. If he's saying those type of things to an undrafted rookie quarterback, I don't think he's going to be too much in the head of this guy to go the opposite direction. This team is still in contention. They're only one game behind in the playoff ranks, and they need a spark, and this guy's delivering it. I don't think you put a prevent type of offense out there at this point, or handcuff him.
Yeah, exactly. But my point is, there are already some people that are already down on Pickett, and I'm just like, wow, I don't know that you're ever going to be happy, because if that's the starting point for a rookie, you should expect it to just get better as it goes, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger's first game in for the injured Tommy Maddox wasn't impressive either.
No,
it was probably, in my opinion, I think Kenny Pickett looked more poised and confident in this game versus Ben Roethlisberger in the first game he appeared. Now, what happens afterwards, it could be a different story.
But I mean, the Steelers have lost 3 straight games. You hear fans say it's a lot of different things. It's the quarterback play. It's the offense. It's the lack of running game. It's the, but you hear opposite things sometimes. Like, I still think it was so funny that after the game, I saw some people complaining that the Steelers or saying the Steelers' offense only got going in the second half because they were running so much. And then somebody else turns around and says the Steelers' offense, they abandoned the run too quickly in the second half. Which tells me they're probably right where they need to be in the middle. If you think about it, if someone's unhappy one way and someone's unhappy the other way. So, but a lot of people were saying, is it the coaches? Is it the players? What's the disconnect and everything else? To me, I'm saying if Kenny Pickett comes out and I'm not talking about even necessarily production. I'm talking about, I don't know about you. I felt like he came in with the swagger, right? Because that's just who he is. If he doesn't have the swagger, I don't think that's him. I think that's coming from I don't know, like you said, probably not the head coach if he makes comments like that, or the coordinator, or things like that. You got to remember, sometimes these guys are good cop, bad cop. Coach Tomlin says, hey, go out there, let it all hang out. This is you. But then Coach Tomlin says, the offensive coordinator, hey, rein him in. Make sure he's you're in his ear about take care of the ball. So that way you're kind of getting a little bit of both. I'm just saying, I want to see the same Kenny Pickett. And if we don't, then I'm going to get frustrated to feel like they were holding him back. Because if you're going to hold him back, why even go to him?
Right. No, I agree 100%. Yeah. But with me, I think that if there's a possibility that, well, if you look back at when Mason Rudolph came into the game last year against the Detroit Lions, he had a tremendous amount of passing attempts in that game. Do you think that was because it was Mason Rudolph, or that was the game plan and he was just so happened to be thrown in at the last second? Well, Kenny Pickett was thrown in during the middle of this game for Mitch Trubisky's game plan. So I think that there's a possibility the game plan is going to be completely different against the Buffalo Bills and be more run emphasis to protect him. And that might be why we see a different Kenny Pickett.
Yeah. And who's deciding that? Not Kenny Pickett.
That would be decided. Yeah, that would be the coach.
Yeah. So my thing is, if if you see a huge difference in just the style and swagger of Kenny Pickett this week, that to me, that's a coaching issue. If you see the same Kenny Pickett, that's when I'm going to say, kudos, Steelers coaches, for doing what you need to do to get your players to perform the way they can perform. So I think this is going to, and being a former coach, I don't jump all over coaches. I really don't. A lot of times you're in a no-win situation with a lot of stuff. Like I said, with the running in the second half, they ran too much. They didn't run enough. That's the life of an NFL coach. When things go great, they take you for granted. When things go wrong, it's always your fault. That's how it's going to be. And I'll be honest with you, I sometimes get frustrated, anything other than one extreme, one way or the other, and you're accused of being the other when it comes to the Steelers coaches. We'll say particularly head coach Mike Tomlin. Okay. If you think Mike Tomlin does anything well, then the Fire Tomlin crew is going to be after you of being an apologist. You're just a Tomlin apologist. What has he done for all this time? Blah, blah, blah. Then you've got the Tomlin walks on water crew, that he is the greatest coach the Steelers had. He's a Hall of Fame coach, never had a losing season, blah, blah, blah. And if you say anything critical about a decision along the way, you're just a Tomlin hater. You know what's really going on? The truth is somewhere in between. And I'm not saying exactly in between. Right. I think Coach Tomlin is a very good NFL coach, and I am a supporter of Coach Tomlin. But I'm also going to be critical when I think they don't do things right. I'm going to be critical when he calls a timeout with 50 seconds left rather than let the clock run. This is even in the first half. Rather than let the clock run down when you still have timeouts, and rather than run your plays at the very end, like the Jets did this past week at the very end of the game, he'll call the timeout with tons of time left, and next thing you know, they score on the next play, and you're allowing Jamar Chase to get a touchdown back on you like they did last year because they called the timeout through it. When you do those kind of things, I'm going to be critical. That does not move me from the Tomlin walks on water to the Tomlin needs to never coach again category. The truth is in the middle, and that is someone can be a very, very good coach and not get it right all the time. Where do you fall in there, Daniel?
Oh, man. I probably somewhere in the middle. I think that there are some things that Tomlin does that frustrates me. I think he can be a little bit stubborn, but it's also a formula for success, and it's been a winning formula for a while for him. So at the same time, you can't get too upset with the way, some of his philosophies. However, results also matter. And for the last decade or so, the playoff wins haven't been there. And it needs to be addressed. I mean, that's not excusable.
It's exactly not. You can't just sweep it under the rug. There's something, and that's why. Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to let you go right back to it, but that's why on this show, one of the ones my brothers and I say often is we don't live in our fears unless it's the postseason, because it just seems like what happens with Coach Tomlin in the postseason. It's very, very simple.
Everybody else gets a little tight.
That's what it seems like. I'm sorry. I'm going to play that sound clip all the time because I got it. So go ahead, back to what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at some of the things that he's done postseason wise, or even when you look at sometimes, I mean, they call them Tomlin games, is where the team falls to a team they should win. Yeah. They're not prepared, things of that nature. I feel that, he needs to be accountable for. But at the same token, when you look at the success of the other coaches in the NFL, he's up there with some of the best, and he's a future Hall of Famer. He hasn't had a losing season. And I think when you have even if you have a Hall of Fame, head coach, a losing season to get top draft capital to build your team should be, there, if not expected. I mean, you can't expect the team to be in contention and a Super Bowl player team every year. It's not feasible. If you expect that, then you're going to be highly disappointed.
Yeah. And honestly, I've debunked this a lot of times on my Stat Geek. When it comes to Coach Tomlin, they're like, oh, they lose games where they're favored to win. You know what? So does every NFL team. My goodness, look at all those years with the dynasty of the Patriots. They were never underdogs. Well, not never, but they were rarely underdogs. But they didn't go undefeated. I mean, they did one year during the regular season, but other years they didn't. Do you want to know why? Because teams lose games when they're favored. And do you want to know what the Steelers also do? They win games when they're underdogs. Mm-hmm. They do. Yeah. That's the NFL. So you think, it's a bad loss. This Jets loss was a bad loss, but I've said it so many times since the game. People are going to be tired of hearing it from me. 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. Pickett coming in, energizing the offense. Even when Minka almost pulls in that interception on the. I mean, he was close to the line of scrimmage. That would have been really. That ball was gunned at him when you think about it. But if he pulls that in, man, that's 6 points easy. And I never thought about that's not a big deal. Man, that would have been a big deal because I never imagined that the Steelers were going to blow that 10-point lead. It just never seemed to sink in.
It was one of those games where I was watching it and I felt like, man, the Steelers got the control of this game. I was never worried about it. And then all of a sudden I was like, are you kidding me? We freaking lost.
Yeah.
It was one of those. And it was like, man, you got so high and so up there when Kenny Pickett comes in, the emotions are rocking, and then you lose. You're sitting there feeling like, man, that feels like a tie.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean, but it's not good. And you're going to look back at this loss and be like, man, I'll be honest with you. This isn't making an excuse or anything else. I am not, but I'm not going to be shocked to see the New York Jets win some more games this year. I don't think that the Jets are going to go on a huge losing streak and drop, what have they got, 13 games left, and they're going to drop 11 of them. I don't, unless they get more injury bugs or anything. I see that team winning some more games and being in a lot of games. They've got a young team that's on the rise, and they just need a little bit of confidence and to bring it together. And that's just what it is. The loss might look bad right now, but the Steelers have had those losses that look bad when they lose them. And they don't look so bad at the end of the season based on how that team ends up turning out. The big one I come back to, oh my goodness, when was that? It was a Landry Jones game against the Chiefs. The Chiefs were like 1-5 or something like that going into the game. And some people are like, oh, still just have Landry Jones start this game. They'll beat the Chiefs. Let Ben rest another week before he comes back. I'm like, no, you bring back Ben. What happens? They lose to that Chiefs team. That Chiefs team goes on and wins like all but one more of their games. Completely, you look at it completely different when the season's over. The way the injuries are stacking up against him, that Patriots loss might look worse at the end of the season than what it even did at the time, just because of how that team ends up. That's the NFL. But what also comes to the Steelers, what if they get on a roll? Then somebody, like the Browns, then that's a much more impressive win. If you look back and the Steelers end up with a good season, you're only as good as your next game. You're really only as good as your next game. But this is a tough one. This really is. This is a tough one. Before we move on to this game, and we're going to get your score like we do with Big Bro, and we'll do the scores in the live chat. There's been a lot of stuff about Kenny Pickett and people waffle. I've had some people come after me. You can't stand Kenny Pickett. You didn't want the Steelers to draft a quarterback. I'm like, no, I didn't want the Steelers to draft the fourth or fifth best quarterback if the top three were gone before they drafted at 20. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen. The Steelers made a great pick based on how the draft played out. And they're like, oh, you wanted Kenny Pickett to be buried on the depth chart at number 3. I did say the night he was drafted that if he wasn't 1, it was okay if he was 3, because as long as he's learning, that's all right. What really matters is if he's playing or not.
Right.
But I wanted to play something for you real quick. I went back to say, what do you remember Jeff Hartman playing on his Let's Ride where we had an audio of some of the staff from BTSC and their reaction as the pick came in, and Jeff sitting there, not Kenny Pickett, not Kenny Pickett, not Kenny Pickett, and it's Kenny Pickett. And he since went on to say, he's like, he didn't want to deal with some people that were going to be upset about the pick because of the website. I want to play something for you that I said less than an hour after Kenny Pickett was drafted. This isn't me tooting my own horn or anything like that, but there's some people that keep saying, oh, you've been wanting to hold Kenny Pickett back. No, I haven't been surprised the Steelers have been holding Kenny Pickett back. But just listen to this. The Steelers didn't necessarily have to have the right now guy, but now they do. This is going to be interesting. I'm not ruling out Kenny Pickett as being the starter for the Steelers at some point this season, if not even early in the season.
Wow. All right.
And that's what Jeff had to say about that, because they weren't agreeing with that at the time, that they're like, oh, this is a red shirt year. And I'd have been fine if it was a red shirt year, but that's not how it played out. You always gotta give the Steelers a chance to do the things the way that they do, whether it be someone needs some more development or somebody is ready to go. Do you ultimately have faith in them? Go ahead.
I mean, I'll be honest. I didn't want them to draft Kenny Pickett before they drafted him. I had said I didn't want them to draft a quarterback. My hopes was on the Steelers moving up for Kyle Hamilton. And
yeah, I wanted that one. I have to admit that too. I thought that would have been big. But they didn't even have Terrell Edmonds back at the time, did they? Because that was after the draft. I think they brought back Edmonds.
Right, exactly. There was a big hole, and there was talks about the safety position, and I was hoping that we'd do that. Or Jordan Davis was another one that I was hoping that the Pittsburgh Steelers would grab. And when it came down to the time, and Jordan Davis and Kyle Hamilton were off the board, and the Steelers were picking up a quarterback, Kenny Pickett really didn't even cross my mind because, I listened to a lot of the talking heads, and I was in the Malik Willis train. And
you were reading too much Andrew Wilbar, weren't you?
I was reading too much of a lot of things. And and when Kenny Pickett was drafted, I was like, well, all right. And it wasn't until you see what he's actually able to do in a professional stadium that you're like, man, this guy can be a guy. There are certain plays that he made in preseason. I went out there and saw him in training camp as well. And, I saw his development. I thought he made some really good throws and pressure moments, especially in the red zone and in 7 shots there in training camp. And then I saw his progression in preseason. And then in this game, he made a pass that looked very similar to the Pat Freiermuth pass he made in Jacksonville. Guy coming down, throws it over the middle. And, those things are just flashes. And he, he's getting up. He's got the little bit of, he's jockeying back and forth with the player that just hit him on the ground. I love that. I love his energy and what he brings. And at the end of the day, does it matter what somebody thought of the pick, as long as, hey, this guy's the best option for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now?
Exactly. And it all comes down to this. I know we really need to get moving on with stuff, but it really comes down to something Coach Tomlin said today in his press conference, because I think he alluded to it before, is when the time is right, the time is right. You're going to know, and you can't predict when the time is right going to be, even for Coach Tomlin. But he knew after week 3 that the time was not right to start Kenny Pickett, but he knew at halftime the time was right in week 4. Mm-hmm. You never know it until it's there. And for those people that were saying Kenny Pickett's the most pro-ready quarterback in this class, well, remember the class he was in. No one else went until the 3rd round. Okay, he's already 24. You've got to play him this year. No, they didn't. And if things would have played out differently, if you get better play from all the offense, because Coach Tomlin specifically wanted to say today, I'm not putting this on the feet at Mitch Trubisky. Just the offense was not rolling, and we needed something different. Which I completely get. If things were going a little bit different, some people even say in the live chat, if Mason Rudolph would have been the starter, maybe it's even different. They might have won more games. They might have been 0-4. They might have been 2-2. They might have been 3. You never know. You can play what if until you go crazy. The bottom line is the Steelers weren't crazy for not playing Kenny Pickett. I said it before when they had their quote unquote clerical error, that if they would have started him at 3rd on the depth chart, that wasn't crazy. There were people who thought that was unthinkable, incomprehensible. I'm like, it's not. It's really not. It's really in what you can do to get his growth in the best place. And if you could keep from having to play Kenny Pickett and allow him to grow, that's going to be better for him, then do it. But if now's the time and you're not hurting his growth, then now's the time. and you're never going to know how those are until you're in those situations. You can try to plan on it. You can try to anticipate it. But I think most of us realized, and I felt when people were calling for Kenny Pickett, I'm like, it's too soon. It's too soon. But when they did it, I'm like, I think the time's right. I was on my way there. The time was right. What do you think of the timing ultimately?
I thought it should have been done to start the Jets game, to be honest with you. I think that after the Browns game, there was a long week in preparation. I think that Kenny Pickett could have come out stronger in this game had he had a full week of preparation. The announcers stated multiple times throughout the game that they didn't see this coming, that Kenny Pickett didn't get any reps or any of those things.
Now, hold on. I know that's what they said. And a lot of people have been saying that. But this is what I'm going to say. How much were the announcers really at practice that week? Were they there every day for the whole practice? I don't think they were. Kenny Pickett was saying he didn't get any more reps than he normally did, but he didn't say that he didn't get reps. But just to make sure because I've had to correct people in our stuff that they said Kenny Pickett got 0 reps in practice all week. That's not the case either. But I understand what you're saying. He didn't get more reps than he would have otherwise. Go ahead.
Right. There was no indication of him being the starter or things of that nature. And I felt that, maybe you give him more reps if you're 2 quarters away from him coming in. But, I was surprised. I didn't think it was going to happen, period. But, I thought once it did happen and you saw the spark, I realized that it was the right moment and it was the right time for it to happen. And it was what needed to be done. And I think with this full week in preparation, we're going to get a good chance to see what he's going to be able to do against a strong defense. It's a huge matchup for him coming up.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. Some people are like, oh, no, go back. It's okay to go back to Mitch because, well, first of all, you're saying it's because it's the Bills. He knows them. But this is such a tough matchup. Do you really want to throw Kenny Pickett out there? You know what? Part of me is almost like, hey, Kenny, we're 2 touchdown underdogs. Let it hang out.
Yeah.
If they take that approach, then I love that it's a game like this. Because you know what? What happens if he throws 3 interceptions and the Steelers lose by 30 points? It's not any different than if they would have lost by 1.
Right.
But I'd rather them go for it and come up way short than not go for it and come up just short.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the fact that this is, in my opinion, I don't think they're going to be a 14-point underdog at any other point in the season unless things really go downhill. So to me, this is probably their most difficult game of the year.
I agree.
I
definitely agree.
So there are things you can take away from this other than a victory, but I know the Steelers need to win. As Coach Tomlin says, our business is winning. We've got to get back to business. So, man, if Kenny Pickett comes out and pulls this off.
Oh, dude.
That's the perfect reaction. Oh, dude.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That really is. So this is a tough one.
Yeah, the next Acrisure Stadium game, you're going to see the Kenny Pickett, with his finger out instead of Ben on the side there of the stadium that the Yinzers put out there, that sign. It's going to be amazing. It's man, if he ends up pulling this off, I mean, this could turn our season around completely, especially the outlook of it. Yeah,
I mean, the Steelers still haven't won a game without TJ Watt ever since 2017. I mean, you hate saying that, but you knew one of those things was going to break going into this Jets game because the Steelers. What was it? Mike Tomlin had never lost a game with extra prep time or something like that. But they've also never won a game without TJ Watt. One of them had to break. Unfortunately, it was the wrong one. Hey, they just got to go hang out. We got to get rolling into these because I know there's a lot of people in the live chat tonight, so I really want to bring up their scores. What is your score prediction for this game? Now, I'm going to remind this to everyone, so don't enter in your score until I actually say that I want it in the live chat. But go ahead and load it up. If you don't put a team, then we assume that it's the Steelers that you have as the winning team. So, Daniel, what do you got?
Well, I'm really concerned about this defense. And with that being said, I think that it's going to be very tough to stop Allen and the Bills consistently. I think they're going to put up 34 points. I think the Steelers are going to keep it close for a while. I think they're going to, I think they're going to play kind of conservative early and have to play catch up just because, the rookie quarterback. But I'm going 34-24 Buffalo Bills in this game.
Okay, so you're going 34-24. People are already putting in scores. Guess what? I'm not bringing those up. Not going to do it. You're breaking the rules. But there. Now it's loading. Now I brought it up and people can bring their scores. So you got 34-24. I will give my prediction on the preview like I normally do. And we will run through these scores here real quick here to finish up. Man, people are ready, okay? George tested. He was ready for it. He says, Pickett shows bottom line is Steelers win 31-28 is what he says. Steel Dog 28 says 24-21 Steelers. Thomas Riley, 42-24 Bills. Steelers Pittsburgh 20-17. That would be Steelers. Rod Nizer, I think I got that right. Bills 35, Steelers 13. That's Claypool 0. That's funny. There we go. Let's see who we got. Bernardo Vasquez. Sorry. Bills 31-17. Robert Lucky 20-10 Bills. I'll be honest with you. This is one that I don't know. The Steelers are going to have to score points to have any chance in this game, in my opinion. So, but if they can hold the Bills' offense down, they really have a great chance to win this game. The Steelers either got to score a bunch of points or their defense is going to have to be unlike we've seen so far this year. Great 103. Now you put it in there when you're supposed to. Very good. Bills 38-20. Pedro, he's got 24-21 Steelers. Okay. Must be nuts. 48-6. That's got to be Steelers because it didn't put an A down there. Rob Thitoff or Thitoff. Sorry, Rob. 31-17 Bills. Christopher 11 says, yeah, do you believe miracles? 27-24 Steelers. That would, we might not have anything left of what I'm going to talk about as soon as we're done with scores here, and that is the Survivor League. I got to give an update on that. I forgot it last week because, especially with you being here, Daniel. Mark Malone says 31-27 Steelers. Nate Vance Lake says going 30-21 Bills. Rico Parsons says 34-17 Steelers. Jacob Heinrich says, my wife says Bills 27, Steelers 24. There you go. Steelers fan. Just here for the food. Good Guys 34. Mafia Table Jumpers 31 with Boz hitting it. Claude Bishop says 28-24 Black and Gold. Occam's Ox gave us the Clubber Lang prediction. Payne, Josh Parker says 27-24 Bills. Demetrios, 31-17 Bills. And just because you pick the Bills to win doesn't mean, you're a bad fan. You don't think they're going to win. No, there's a difference, but you don't think they can win. I think the Steelers can come out and win this game. The question is, will they? It's going to take a very, very, very slim margin of error to win this game. Wouldn't you say so, Daniel?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's going to take a lot, and it's going to be a total team effort, but the Steelers can do it.
Yep. George OTJ, 29-28 Steelers. No One You Know, 31-17 Bills. Sherry Richards says 37-31 Bills. Tyler W says Steelers score 30, but he says 44-31. I don't know if he meant that was the Steelers with 31, but I'm assuming. Let's say he says the Steelers go 44. I don't know. Dusk Thunder 9 says 35-24 Bills. And the Pickett's going to throw a lot of TDs. Ryan Simon says 38-28 Bills. Devin Logan says 31-21 Bills. Evan Giles says 42-38 Bills. James, we got a lot of people in here tonight. James Donovan says 23-21 Steelers. He says the money line plus 600. I saw the money line at plus 800 when I did my betting preview. So if you want to do that, get on it at 800 rather than 600. Okay. Tyler W. He clarified that it was 20 was Bills. The Steelers go over 30, but it's there. You know what, Jesus, I would take this. He says 20-20 Steelers win. Well, that's not a win, but if it isn't, I'd take a 20-20 tie against the Bears. Michelle Tucker says 21-17 Steelers. Steelers Nation Australia, Marky D. Minka Fitzpatrick 24, Bills nothing. Gotta love it. Well, just to bring it up, we're once again we're over our time again this week. Sorry about that, but I've got to give Daniel props because we are now down to 16 contestants in the Survivor Football League. 16 from 435 through 4 weeks down to 16. And it's not like there was a big mass people didn't enter their picks. Yeah, there was some every week. But there's just been the upset. This past week, a quarter of the people picked the Steelers and they got eliminated. There's been, when Kansas City lost, that knocked out a bunch of people. There's 16 people left. You are the only person on BTSC staff that's still left. You are one of 16. You've got a chance at that Cam Hayward football.
Wow.
So yes, it is low. I'm worried that there's going to be a crazy game in there that everyone gets knocked out the same week and we have to start over with the people that were left for that week. We'll see how it goes.
I will say this: I almost lost twice. I had initially picked the Browns over the Falcons, and then I changed it to Green Bay before the game started.
And that would almost. I mean, they were down to their third quarterback, and then New England still had a lead. And took overtime. And just think, if they don't get that kick at the end and it ends in a tie, you're out. No, because there was people out week one when there was a tie. They picked the Colts and it was a tie. So hey, but it almost doesn't count in Survivor. You're on.
Story.
You're
still there.
So there's only 2 people left in your specific league. I think the most in any league is 5. I think 2 of them have 5, 1 has 4, 1 has 2, and 1 of them is done. So that's the update for those of you who want to know where it's coming. Daniel, for us to get out of here, why don't you go ahead and give any kind of final thoughts, plug anything you want to plug, and just or where people can find you on social media or anything of that nature.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's going to be a great time for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a new era. This is, be happy, be excited. This is optimism at its maximum. And you can find me on YouTube at State of the Steelers. Go look me up. I'm giving away actually 2 tickets to the Vegas Raiders and Steelers game to a subscriber. So go subscribe to me there. And man, I think the Steelers have a good chance to turn this season around if Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers defense can, the offense and the defense can do something this weekend against the Bills. Things could turn around real quick. They're not done yet.
Yeah, I mean, this would be a game that completely would turn the season around. It really would. But at the same time, you're still asking an awful lot for them to go in there and get this win, especially after doing it last year too. Those Bills have got to be like, we don't like what happened last year. It's a tough one. It really is. But Daniel, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Hey, make sure you're checking out all Behind the Steel Curtain podcasts. If you're just checking out the stuff on YouTube, you're missing a lot of stuff, a lot of great audio content. We've got a Let's Ride coming out tomorrow morning from Jeff Hartman. Make sure you check that out. And a lot of other stuff that's going to be on there. You've got our normal lineup. We will be back with our, the biggest change this week, be it a normal week, was no Big Bro on this show. Otherwise, we should be good. We should be rolling. Make sure you check out State of the Steelers podcast Saturday morning on Behind the Steel Curtain audio only network. Daniel, thanks for coming. Rich isn't here to send us out. So you know what we're going to have to do for next week? We're going to have to wait a little longer. We'll see you next time.